During the Second World War, one of the most celebrated and respected German generals was Erwin Rommel. Commonly known as the Desert Fox, even his enemies acknowledged Rommel's skill on the battlefield. There was for some time a belief that he carried out war without hate against the British in North Africa, but recently information has come to the forefront that he may have been complicit in a number of German war crimes, and that Rommel's forces did treat enemy prisoners of war and soldiers brutally, and also native people suffered under his command. There has been also debate about how much of a Nazi Rommel was, and he did accept the regime, and he was a supporter of Hitler for some years, but Rommel fell heavily from grace. In 1944, he was implicated in the July 20th plot, the bombing of the Wolf's Lair, and the subsequent plan to overthrow Hitler, and with this Nazi officials arrived at his doorstep with a choice for Rommel to make, but every option would have resulted in his death. In death, Rommel remained a hero for the Germans after his state funeral, but the true story of his last 24 hours was not told until years after World War II had come to an end. Today we look at the final 24 hours of Erwin Rommel's life. As always, to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Following his successes as a panzer commander, Rommel was placed in command of the German forces in Africa, the Afrika Korps, and he was considered a tactical genius, and he rose to the rank of Field Marshal. In 1943, Rommel was tasked to oversee the construction of the Atlantic Wall, and the offensively successful commander was placed in charge of defensive plans, and he was tasked to try and repel the inevitable Allied invasion of France, which would come of course on D-Day, June the 6th, 1944. Rommel was confident in Germany at the start of the conflict, but as things turned against the Wehrmacht with the defeat of the Battle of Stalingrad, Rommel's faith in Germany waned, as did his belief in Hitler. He had also discovered about the crimes of the concentration camps and the exterminations that were taking place all across Europe, and he believed that the Germans would lose the war. He may have been involved in the July 20th plot, which would result in the bombing of the Wolf's Lair in 1944. He thought that Hitler needed to be arrested and deposed, so someone could do a better job of running the war effort, and he also believed in possibly securing peace with the Allies. But 3 days before the bomb exploded in the Wolf's Lair, Rommel was seriously injured as the car he was travelling in was struck by a British aircraft, and Rommel was taken to hospital and was sent to Germany to recover. Rommel's name had been mentioned in the investigations after the bomb had gone off, and he was implicated with the plot. The exact nature of his knowledge or involvement has been debated, but he was likely implicated based on the fact that it was no secret that Rommel was angry with Hitler, and he was defeatist at the time. Hitler believed that Rommel needed to be taken out and executed, but Hitler had a huge issue. Rommel amongst the German people was a hero, and he was someone who the people loved, and he had for years been boosted in Nazi propaganda by the Goebbels propaganda administration to almost like a godlike figure. Hitler could not tell the German people that Rommel was a traitor, and he believed it would be another nail in the coffin of the morale of the Third Reich, so his decision was to force the hand of Rommel to take his own life, and then cover up the reality of the situation by mentioning that he had succumbed to injuries that he previously sustained in the airstrike. Rommel had been for a number of months recovering in his home in Herlingen with his family. It was the 14th of October 1944 that was the final day of Erwin Rommel. That morning Rommel woke up, possibly knowing that he would never wake up in his bed again. In the days before, his son Manfred, who was 15 at the time, had enrolled to be part of an anti-aircraft crew near to the family home, doing his bit for the German war effort, and on the day of Rommel's death, his son Manfred had been given permission to go home, and it's mostly Manfred's account which helps us form the last 24 hours of Erwin Rommel's life. At 7 a.m. that morning, Manfred Rommel arrived at the family home in Herlingen, and he noticed that his father was having breakfast. After entering the kitchen, Manfred Rommel sat down with his father, and they shared breakfast together around the dinner table. Following this, the father and son then took a walk in the garden to get some fresh air, Manfred most probably talking to his father about the training he was receiving and what he had been learning. Rommel had been informed that he was to have a meeting, and he knew before that this could have secured his fate. He allegedly said to his son, "At 12 o'clock, 2 generals will come here to discuss my future, so today I will see what is planned for me, the People's Court or a new command post in the east." He knew it was either a treason charge or a dangerous post fighting the Red Army, who were heavily battering the Germans, forcing their retreat. He then said to his son, "My dear boy, our enemy in the east is so horrifying that any other matter goes to second place. If the enemy manages to conquer Europe, even temporarily, it would be the end of everything that makes life worth living. Of course, I would go to the east." Shortly before midday and the arrival of the generals, Rommel went to his bedroom on the first floor of the house, and he changed his civilian clothes and then put on his Afrika Korps tunic, his favourite uniform. Around 12 o'clock, a dark green car with a Berlin registration plate on it stopped in front of the Rommel residence. Inside the house at the time was Erwin Rommel, his son, and Captain Hermann Aldinger, a corporal and war veteran, who lived with them. 2 generals, Wilhelm Burgdorf and Ernst Meisel, approached the house, and they knocked on the door, and they were allowed in. They were respectful and spoke to Mrs. Rommel, and they also then asked to speak with Rommel in private. After a few minutes, Rommel came downstairs, and he spoke with his wife, who was also, as mentioned, in the house. Rommel's son followed him, and he was in the room looking very pale. What had happened was that Burgdorf and Meisel had given him an ultimatum. This was that he would go with them to Berlin and face the People's Court, which would almost certainly have resulted in execution by means such as the German guillotine known as the Fallbeil, or the hanging beam in Plötzensee prison, of which many military officials and generals faced in the aftermath of the July 20th plot. In particular, the hanging beam of Plötzensee had a number of hooks installed so many people could be hanged at once. One of his other options was to go with the men and to then take his life using a cyanide capsule that had been brought with Burgdorf and Meisel. If he chose this option, he would be given a state funeral and would then be buried with full military honours, and his family would receive full pension payments. There was also a third less favourable option, and this was that he would accompany Burgdorf and Meisel, and they would drive straight to Hitler, where Rommel would be forced to defend himself in front of the Führer, and this terrified him. It was clear he was being coerced and pushed into taking his own life, and this is what he selected. Rommel spoke to his son in the room and said, "I just had to tell your mother that in a quarter of an hour I will be dead. It is hard to be killed by your own people, but the house is surrounded and Hitler is accusing me of treason. Taking into consideration the period I served in Africa, they will give me the chance to die by poisoning. The 2 generals brought poison with them. It is fatal in 3 seconds. If I accept this, the usual measures will not be taken against my family. That is you, and also they will leave my staff alone." Rommel was straight with his son, and Manfred asked his father, "Do you believe all of this?" And the Desert Fox replied with, "Yes, I think it is in their interest not to leave this whole affair to light. By the way, I was instructed to make you promise that you will keep silence. If a single word of this comes to light, they will no longer feel bound to this agreement." His son asked him if he could defend his father and take up arms against the generals, and Rommel said, "There is no point. It is better for one man to die than all to be killed in an uproar shooting. We virtually have no ammunition anyway." With this he said his goodbye to his son and asked him to call Captain Aldinger. Aldinger was speaking to the general's driver, and he could not go and see Rommel. When he found out what was happening, Rommel said, "They will give me a state funeral. I asked that it will take place in Ulm. In a quarter of an hour, you, Aldinger, will receive a phone call from Wagner Schule Hospital in Ulm, and they will inform you that I suffered cerebral seizures on the way to the conference. I have to go. They've only given me 10 minutes. He then said his final goodbyes. Rommel's son helped him put on his leather jacket, and Rommel pulled out his wallet, which had 150 Reichmarks inside, and Aldinger told him that he didn't need to take his wallet where he was going. He walked through the hall and he saw his Dachshund dog that jumped up at him, and he then told his son to lock the dog in the office, and then the party left the house as the two generals were stood at the gate waiting. They greeted Rommel as he approached, and a group of villagers had gathered to see what was happening. The car was ticking over, and the SS driver opened the door for the Field Marshal. Rommel, carrying his Field Marshal baton under his left arm, shook hands with his son and Captain Aldinger before climbing into the car, and the two generals sat down beside him, and the doors were then shut. Rommel looked forward and not to the side as the car drove off. The car drove out of Herlingen, and the driver, SS Stabsscharführer Heinrich Dürser, made a short trip out of the village. They drove for just a matter of minutes, and then Dürser and General Meisel exited out of the car, leaving Rommel and Bergdorf still remaining. They left for 5 minutes, and when they looked towards the car, Bergdorf gestured them to come back, and the driver had noticed that Rommel was slumped over on the back seat, having consumed the cyanide capsule that was kept for him. To make it appear as if he had died from other means, Rommel was then taken to hospital, but he could not obviously be revived. Rommel's son had found out later that the car had stopped to kill his father just a few hundred metres away from the house in an open space at the edge of a forest. 10 minutes later, the Rommel family were informed that Erwin Rommel had died, and the driver returned and claimed that he saw Rommel collapsed with his Field Marshal baton falling from his hand. It was stated by others that 25 minutes later the telephone rang. Aldinger answered it. It was Major Ehrenberger, speaking from Ulm. "Aldinger," he said, "a terrible thing has happened. Field Marshal Rommel has had a hemorrhage, a brainstorm in the car. He is dead." Aldinger did not reply. "Did you hear what I said?" asked Ehrenberger. "Yes," said Aldinger, "I heard." "Then please tell Frau, Mrs. Rommel, that I am coming back to the house at once." Aldinger walked slowly upstairs to Rommel's widow. He had no need to speak. The official Nazi Party line regarding Rommel's death was that he had died from the injuries he sustained in the attack by the aircraft. He was given an official day of mourning by Hitler in commemoration with his death, and he was also given a state funeral, but instead of this occurring inside of Berlin, it took place in Ulm, as had been requested by Rommel. Hitler did not attend proceedings, and he sent Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt as his representative, and he had not been told that Rommel had been killed upon Hitler's orders. The Allies later found out the truth from Rommel's widow and his son, who wrote them a letter informing them about the true state of affairs. But the truth behind Rommel's death was much darker. The Gestapo had been in full force and had been dispatched from Berlin, and they were secretly waiting in the area of the Rommel household and the local village, and they were ready to shoot him and raid the house if any resistance had taken place, probably taking his son and everyone else with them. The SS driver would later claim that when he went back to the car, he saw Rommel crying as he died, but this would have probably not been the case, as within 3 minutes of consuming the cyanide, Rommel would have most certainly been dead. Ernst Meisel, who survived World War II, obviously did not see the death as he was with the driver, away from the car, but General Wilhelm Bergdorf, at the end of World War II, went the same way as Rommel, inside of Hitler's Führer bunker. The Field Marshal baton of Rommel had been taken by the Nazis and was kept inside of Hitler's headquarters, and Bergdorf bragged about the fate of him and showed the baton to people to brag. His hat had also been taken, his service cap. There were also false attempts to bring Rommel back to life, and the Nazis forced a doctor to attempt resuscitation for just show, and one of the Nazis had even thrust a gun at the doctor as he refused to do this initially. Dr. Bredehoff knew how Rommel had died, but he was forced by the Nazis to write Rommel's cause of death as a heart attack. Today, Erwin Rommel is buried in a large grave in Herlingen, a short distance away from the family home, where he was forced to choose his impending fate. On the anniversary of his death, many former soldiers, including veterans of the Africa campaign, have in the past gathered around his grave and monument. The final 24 hours of Erwin Rommel was a ruthless one, and he knew that when he received the call about the generals who were coming to see him, that there was a very good chance that he would be killed. He was given absolutely no choice in the matter, and he chose the admirable option, providing his family with financial support in the form of his pension, and Rommel was then buried as a hero. The German people believed that he had been a victim of the British plane attack upon the convoy, but the true reality of Rommel's fate was much darker, that their heroic field marshal had been purged by the Führer, who was losing a grip on the Second World War, and who was losing a grip of his generals. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.